The group makes it deep into the beast labyrinth, finally hitting the 39th floor. Akito realizes they've managed to dive this deep in just a few hours. It's crazy fast, so he mentions to the group that they're making great time. He's feeling pretty good because at this speed, he figures they can probably get their materials to the guild by the end of the day. Getting this done would put their party, Golden Fang, even closer to reaching that S-rank goal, but the mood shifts instantly when Akito stops in his tracks, looking pretty stressed out. The rest of the party stands around as the leader sighs about how much of a pain the situation is. It turns out there's another locked door standing in their way, completely cutting off the path ahead. The leader doesn't even hesitate, just looks back and barks at Akito to go open it up. He tells Akito he's only useful for things like this and needs to pull it together. Akito just looks down and says fine. Akito steps up to the massive door and reaches out toward the heavy iron lock. He calls out for it to unlock, and the mechanical parts immediately start clicking and popping open. The giant stone doors rumble as they swing wide, letting a bright light pour into the dark hallway. The leader doesn't waste a second, heading straight inside while telling the rest of the group to get moving. Shield Guy looks back with a frustrated face, telling Akito to stop spacing out and get with the program. Akito just looks down and lets out a tired sigh. He's clearly feeling the weight of the disrespect, and the leader tells Shield Guy to just ignore him, so they both walk away without another word. Left behind at the entrance, Akito wonders when exactly he became so jaded about his life as an adventurer. It all comes down to his special skill called Unlock and Lock, a power that lets him control anything from treasure chests to heavy shackles, though it's the only thing the party values him for. The skill is pretty versatile, letting him pop open anything from massive doors and windows to locked treasure chests. Usually, most adventurers have to spend a ton of time and energy just hunting for a single key inside these dungeons. But Akito's extra skill lets him skip all that grunt work entirely, making the whole process a total shortcut. Even though he's treated like a burden, Akito actually thinks his power is the perfect tool for a support role. He accepts that this is just his job in the party, though as he writes in his journal, he can't help but feel that the others could at least show him a little more gratitude instead of leaving him in the dust. Suddenly, Akito stops in his tracks as he realizes they aren't alone anymore. Something big is definitely here. A group of massive minotaurs armed with giant axes steps out of the shadows. Blocking their path, Akito starts to sweat, realizing they're facing a whole pack of rank B monsters all at once. The leader just smirks and draws his blade, telling the monsters he guesses they won't be letting the party reach the boss room easily. The Golden Fang leader yells at Akito to get moving, and Akito just grits his teeth and tells him he's already on it. Akito explains that this specific move is perfect for enemies who can tank physical hits, and then he triggers his unlock skill. Suddenly the chains binding his power snap and fly everywhere, releasing a surge of energy into the room. The leader just stands there with a smug look on his face, feeling completely untouchable as things start heating up. He lets out a loud laugh and charges straight into the pack of giant minotaurs without a second thought. Moving fast, he calls out his lightning flash slash and tears through the air with his blade, landing a massive hit that sends blood spraying everywhere as the bull monster gets shredded. The leader laughs it off and says it doesn't matter how much armor these cows wear, it's all useless against him. But Akito looks pretty worried and shouts out to get the team's attention before things get even messier. The shield guy steps up with a serious look, telling the rest of the party he's going to draw them in. The shield guy plants his feet and calls out his defender skill to hold the line against the massive bull monster. He locks his eyes on the target, focusing everything on the incoming threat. The giant minotaurs aren't backing down though, and they let out a loud roar right in Akito's direction, while the whole room lights up with a crazy flash of energy from the clash. Looking totally calm, the shield guy tells the monsters they aren't actually that tough even with their numbers. Then he shouts shield bash, and slams his heavy gear forward with enough force to send one of those huge bull monsters flying through the air across the room. The monster looks completely stunned as it tries to figure out what just hit it, so the witch girl takes the opening and calls out her roaring flame spear, magic standing her ground as a massive swirl of fire gathers above her staff, ready to finish the job. The witch girl looks completely hyped as she shouts that her big spell is coming. The Golden Fang leader and the shield guy just stand there watching the show while Akito looks on, totally caught off guard by what's happening. The magic hits with a massive explosion that fills the whole room, and as the smoke starts to clear, someone complains that because of Julia's overkill the blast was so strong there aren't even any monster parts left to collect. Julia doesn't seem to care, saying it's not her fault since there were so many monsters she had to go all out like that. The leader just shrugs it off, telling them whatever, and then he turns his attention over to Akito. The Golden Fang leader yells at Akito to hurry up and go grab the magic stones from the floor. He keeps going, telling Akito he should already be doing this without even being told. The guy reminds him that since he can't actually fight, this is pretty much his only job. Aikido just stands there and takes the heat, looking pretty stressed. The shield guy jumps in too, saying that if Aikido isn't going to help out in actual combat, it's only natural that he handles all the leftover chores like this. Julia adds her 2 cents, complaining that they're the ones getting tired from the battle. She takes a dig at him for not helping, so Aikido just mumbles that it's his bad. What they don't get is that unlocking a skill tree takes a massive amount of resources, but he still thinks there's value in powering up the party's skills, so he keeps pushing. Aikido stands there quietly, thinking about how he's spent all this time supporting the others instead of himself. He's been focused on making sure the talented people in the party get the right skills, believing that's way more important than him getting stronger. The group reaches a pair of massive stone doors, and the leader notes they've finally found the boss room. He doesn't even move, just orders Aikido to go open the doors. Aikido steps up and places his hand on the cold stone, using his skill to unlock the way, and the heavy entrance starts to slide open with a loud, deep grinding sound. But as the light from the room hits him, Aikido sees something that catches him totally off guard. Before he can even react, a massive force slams into him and sends him crashing into the floor, leaving him staring up in total shock at what just hit him. The Golden Fang leader looks back and tells Aikido that this is where they part ways, while Julia just says his name, leaving Aikido standing there in total shock. He can't believe it and asks what the leader is even talking about, but the leader just looks annoyed. He asks Aikido if he really can't figure out what's happening just by looking around, and then he drops the hammer. He tells Aikido straight to his face that he simply isn't needed in this party anymore. Aikido stares at the ground, repeating those words to himself while clenching his fist as the reality of the situation starts to sink in. Julia chimes in with a smug look, saying that keeping dead weight who can't even fight is a waste of time. She asks the others if having someone like that around is completely unnecessary, right as Shield Guy closes his eyes and agrees. He says their party doesn't have any room for weakling. Aikido finally finds his voice, though he's shaking as he starts to try and defend himself. He yells out that the only reason he can't fight is because he used everything he had to unlock their skill trees first. Aikido shouts at them, saying the only reason they have any strength at all is because he's been giving them his own power. And he reminds Jade that even as a basic swordsman, he can only use that crazy lightning skill because of Aikido's help. Then there's Harold, who can somehow tank a direct hit from a minotaur using nothing but his own body. And even Julia's ability to fire off high-level magic spells without having to wait is all thanks to him. He tells them straight up that every single thing they can do is because of him, but it came at a cost. He explains that he's been pouring every single resource he had into the three of them, leaving nothing for himself. Since he gave everything away, he hasn't been able to actually join them in any of the fights. And that means he hasn't been able to earn even a single point of experience this whole time. It's just been one big cycle that's caused him to fall further and further behind the rest of the group. Looking back at the times they all used to laugh together, Aikido says he truly believed he was doing it all for the good of the party. Aikido looks down, asking if they're actually sure about doing this, and he warns them that the second he leaves, all their unlocked skill trees are going to reset. Jade just laughs it off, shouting that their levels have gone up plenty and says the group can handle things just fine without someone like Aikido helping them out. Julia chimes in too, saying that since their big goal is to hit S rank, she thinks it's just a waste of time to keep a support guy around who can't even fight. Harold steps up and tells Aikido they've already decided to replace him with a skilled enchanter. He says even Aikido must realize he's outlived his usefulness by now, so Aikido grits his teeth and tells them if they want to kick him out. That's fine, but he begs them not to throw him into a boss room when he can't even defend himself. Jade tells Aikido they're looking to save themselves the trouble of actually exiling him, and he explains that officially kicking out a guy like Aikido is just way too much work, because the legal paperwork is such a massive hassle for the party to deal with. Jade gets this creepy look on his face and suggests just making it look like Aikido died in the dungeon. He laughs about how much simpler the paperwork is that way, calling it a smooth process while Aikido starts to lose it, screaming at them and asking why they'd even go this far. Aikido asks if he was really the only one who thought they were friends, but the others just look away. He yells Jade's name one last time, but Jade has clearly had enough of his complaining. Jade tells him to shut the hell up and hits him so hard that Aikido can only let out a pained gasp as he gets tossed across the floor, landing right next to a bright light on the ground. Aikido looks down, sweating and shaking as the reality of being left behind sets in. He realizes he's in deep trouble, thinking to himself that he's gone way too far into the dungeon. Just then, a torch nearby suddenly bursts into a bright flame, and one by one, the rest of the torches around the massive stone room start lighting up. A huge pillar of light shoots straight up from an altar in the center, while Jade and Julia just stand there with those smug looks on their faces. Akito stands there frozen as the light fills the entire room, and then a hand reaches out from the shadows to grab the handle of the sword in the light. A massive monster shows up, breathing heavily and taking up the whole space, leaving Akito staring in total shock as he realizes what he's actually looking at. The energy in the room keeps swirling as the light starts to fade away, revealing a massive black minotaur standing tall in heavy armor and holding a giant sword. Someone yells out in total shock that it's a black minotaur, and Akito starts sweating as he realizes just how crazy strong this thing looks. Jade just stands there with a nasty grin, telling Akito good luck with the monster. He even mocks him by saying he can keep all the loot as a parting gift. But then he adds the catch, saying that's only if Akito can actually beat it, leaving the kid standing there all alone, wondering if every choice he's made up until now was wrong. He can't wrap his head around how someone could just dump a comrade they've known for years. And as he looks down, he remembers how much he actually contributed to the party's success. Akito thinks back to how he always worked his hardest to find the best way forward for everyone, while Julia just laughs. He still can't believe they had the nerve to tell him he wasn't needed anymore after everything they've been through. He clenches his fist so hard his knuckles go white, telling himself there's no way he's going down like this. A heavy chain and lock flash through his mind as he realizes exactly what he needs to do to stay alive, and looking ahead with a cold stare, he tells himself to take all that rage and lock it away where it can't distract him. He stares down the massive monster, knowing that losing his cool right now would be a death sentence, so he remembers the rule about boss rooms being a one-way trip once the fight starts. But he's betting on the fact that if he can just unlock the door, he'll find a way to get out of there. Shouting out that he's going to survive this no matter what, Akito calls out his extra skill. And immediately, a screen pops up showing the Black Minotaur is level 65 with stats way beyond anything he's faced. The Black Minotaur stares him down with those cold eyes, and the analysis screen shows it's got crazy skills, while Akito's own stats look like a joke next to it, leaving him sweating as he sees how weak he really is. He looks over his utility skills one last time, focusing on that lock and unlock extra skill as his only real shot. Looking at the massive gap between them, Akito just gives a bitter laugh and says it's completely hopeless. But suddenly his face changes and he screams out a command, officially declaring that everything is cancelled. He confirms that he's shut down the skill tree unlocks he gave his old party, and as the energy shifts, he tells himself he's taking it all back, not stopping, until every single resource he spent on them is refunded. The monster lets out a deafening roar that shakes the whole room, but Akito yells back that he knows the monster won't wait, so he calls out for the second gate to unlock. The beast lunges forward, pulling its massive arm back to end the fight. The Black Minotaur slams its giant sword down with enough force to shatter the floor. Akito slides under the strike and wonders if he can survive just by dodging. But he knows he's on a clock since he's currently forcing his brain to work past its limits. Looking at the beast, he admits he's feeling pretty nervous, only having 2 out of 8 stages ready. The monster's eye flashes as it tracks his movement, and Akito stares back with sweat rolling down his face, completely locked into the fight. The beast swings again, letting out a massive shockwave that rips the room apart, which leaves the Black Minotaur standing in the middle of a pile of broken stone, while Akito stays low behind the rubble to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. He shouts that he hasn't fully recovered his strength yet, but he's not backing down. Akito locks in and yells for his skill tree to unlock, and suddenly screens start popping up showing his HP and MP stats jumping up by 20 points. He watches as the notifications keep coming, adding 20 to his attack and defense, then his magic power and wisdom get the same 20-point boost right after. His speed stat climbs by 20 as the system keeps moving, leading into a massive percent-based buff where energy filler increases his total health by 20%. Next, Magic Aura unlocks and kicks his total mana up by another 20%, and he can't believe how amazing it is when Attack Wave boosts his offense by 20% too. The streak continues with Tank Mastery, giving his defense a 20% increase, which leaves Akito staring at the screens in shock. It's just way too easy to unlock his own skills. Akito stares at the screen in disbelief, wondering if this is what real skill growth feels like. He realizes he's not even close to being done and can still keep this going. Everything starts clicking as stat boosts for his health and mana flood the screen. He says it's amazing while watching his defense and attack power jump up by 20%. Moving on, he starts unlocking actual combat skills like Fast Blade and Parry, and it doesn't stop there. He even gets access to all types of magic and a skill called Parallel Thought. The system alerts him that he's just picked up a skill called Air Step, and he immediately tests it out by leaping into the air with his sword ready. Just then, he unlocks Shukuchi for even more speed and starts moving across the room like a blur. It's wild because even after grabbing all these powers, he sees he still has plenty of points to spare. He admits to himself that he only missed how much he could do because he was so focused on just being the support guy. But now he's charging ahead, knowing that with these new skills he can actually handle things himself. Aikido finally gets in close. Clashing his blade against the massive black minotaur, the hit lands clean, tearing right through the monster's heavy armor and leaving a huge mark. Seeing that his attacks are actually working, Aikido tells himself he's got this and immediately triggers his fast blade skill, making his sword glow as he prepares to speed things up. He plants his foot hard against the stone floor to launch into a dash. The sheer force of his movement kicks up a massive shockwave that fills the entire room. He stays focused as he blurs past the monster's reach, moving way faster than before. Without giving the beast a second to breathe, he calls out his riot sword skill to keep the pressure on. He realizes this combo is working perfectly, and a system alert pops up showing his mana is already recovering, so he keeps the pressure on, thinking about how Jade was always too stuck up to use this move when he suggested it. The black minotaur stares him down with those creepy eyes. Aikido doesn't waste any time and starts sprinting to close the gap. He looks completely locked in, putting every bit of strength into his arm so he can trigger his flame spear skill, sending huge blades of fire shooting out at the monster. The attack hits like a ton of bricks, tearing up the whole area. The beast lets out a huge roar from the pain, but it's not over yet because smoke pours off its body as the wounds start closing up on their own. Aikido realizes the monster has an auto-regeneration skill, which is going to make this a lot harder, so he barely has a second to react before the monster swings back at him. He manages to parry the hit just in time, the force vibrating through his entire body. Aikido reaches out his hand, getting ready to activate his next move. He's covered in blood and sweat, but he's not backing down for a second. He lands a massive hit that rips right through the minotaur's chest, blood spraying everywhere, but the monster just drops into a crouch and keeps its balance on the stone floor. Aikido locks onto the beast, watching it closely to see what it does next. The minotaur starts giving off this crazy energy as it taps into its hidden power, and its eye transforms, revealing a special magic eye ability that counts as an extra skill. Instead of being scared, Aikido actually starts smiling and says that it's finally here. He's been waiting for the monster to use an extra skill like this just so he can trigger his ability lock, sending glowing chains out to shut the whole thing down. The chains of light slam into the black minotaur, completely locking it down. The monster is totally stunned as its special skill gets shut off before it can even move. Aikido just smiles at the beast and says he's been wanting to try this out for a while. Standing over the monster, he thinks back to how he just wanted to fight alongside his friends, longing for that feeling of accomplishment and the cheers from everyone after a win. He really believed he'd get to experience all of that with his old party, but as the minotaur snarls in front of him, he realizes that's not actually why he's here. It doesn't matter if he's alone now. He grips his sword tight and decides that at the end of the day, he's an adventurer through and through, so he hits a lightning flash slash, ripping through the monster in a blur of speed. Aikido raises his sword high as the energy peaks, finishing off his massive attack. The black minotaur gets completely shredded behind him, falling apart in an instant. He takes a second to catch his breath, then calls out double gate lock to seal the win. Looking at the pile of monster remains, he says he actually did it. His hand is shaking like crazy as he realizes he just beat a dungeon boss solo. In the heat of the moment, he yells out to Julia, asking if she saw that, calling for Harold and Jade too, like they were still right there with him. He starts laughing with pure joy, shouting that even someone like him can fight. With tears in his eyes, he says he's finally able to go on an adventure. And just ahead, the stairs leading out of the boss room are wide open. Aikido spots a teleportation circle nearby and wonders if he can finally go home. He collapses on the floor, thinking about how much money the guild will pay for these minotaur parts. He looks off to the side, curious about how his old party is going to react once they see what he's gathered. He really hopes that Jade, Julia, and Harold will be happy for him, telling himself that it's going to be fine. It's time to move, so looking out over the town in the distance, he decides he's going to go find them right now. Meanwhile, at a tavern, a wooden mug slams onto the table as Jade starts talking. He's got a nasty smirk on his face, saying it's just good riddance. Julia's sitting there with her arms crossed, mentioning that's all he's been talking about since yesterday. Jade just laughs it off, saying the others have to be relieved that Aikido is finally gone too. Jade is cracking up at the table, but Harold just sips his drink and tells him not to get too ahead of himself. Jade doesn't seem worried at all, casually mentioning that their new enchanter is showing up tomorrow, so he finishes off his drink right as the waitress comes over to check on the table. Jade looks at her and asks if she finished cleaning the room exactly like he told her to, but the lady looks completely stressed out, hesitating as she tries to explain what happened. Jade's eyes sharpen and he gets annoyed, asking if she's actually trying to tell him the job isn't finished yet. He stands up and starts yelling about how he can't stand having Akito's junk around for another second, making a scene as he stomps off, while Julia asks why he can't just let the people who work there handle it. Jade doesn't care and says he's just going to throw it all out the window himself, reaching out, and he looks like he's about to lose it from how much he hates the guy. Akito stands there perfectly calm, just wondering why any of this is even happening as Jade looks like he's seen a ghost, stumbling over his words while asking Akito why he's even there. Julia is just as stunned, she can't even find the words to react to him showing up. Even Harold is caught off guard, staring at the guy they all thought was useless. Jade asks why he's back, so Akito just tells him straight up that he defeated the dungeon master. He stands tall in the doorway, making sure they know he took the boss down all by himself. Jade starts losing his mind, screaming that there's no way someone like Akito could actually pull off something that big. He's totally convinced Akito is lying to their faces. Julia jumps right in to back Jade up, yelling about how the whole story is just impossible, and she accuses him of just opening the boss door and running away before the fight even started. Jade starts laughing like a maniac, totally losing it because he thinks the whole situation is a joke. He keeps the insults coming, reminding Akito that he's just a coward who spent the whole time hiding, and there's just no way a guy like that could ever actually pull off a boss kill. Julia joins in with a smug look, saying it's even funnier since they already told him he was useless. She demands to know how he even has the nerve to show his face around them again. Then she takes it even further, telling Akito that if she were him, she'd rather just be dead, making it very clear that there's no place left for him in their party or anywhere near them. She glares at him, admitting she's always hated that calm look he gets in his eyes, so Akito just stands there in silence for a second, letting her finish her little rant before he pulls out some hard evidence, asking if they're still going to doubt him once they see this. Akito holds up his card, telling them straight up that guild card records don't lie, and the screen shows it plain as day. The Black Minotaur is officially on his kill list. Jade completely loses his cool, stuttering that the whole thing is just absurd, while Julia stares at the record in total shock, screaming that it's impossible. Even Harold is dead silent, just staring at the proof with his eyes wide open. Akito starts explaining that back in that room, he had no choice but to fight to survive. He admits there were so many moments where he actually thought he was going to die, but against all the odds, he's the one who stood his ground and made it back alive. He looks them right in the face and asks if they're really going to keep this up, and if they seriously have the nerve to call him dead weight after seeing what he did. Jade grabs Akito by the collar and starts screaming at him to stop talking trash, but Akito doesn't flinch, telling him straight up that he isn't making any of this up. Jade looks down at the horn in his hand and loses it, yelling that a Black Minotaur item can't be real, so Akito just throws his own words back at him, reminding him he called it a parting gift. Akito's expression goes cold as he says that even if he took down the beast alone, the victory feels empty. It doesn't change the fact that they left him for dead. Julia starts panicking, looking over at Jade and asking what they're supposed to do now, while Harold chimes in, suggesting they just lie to the guild and say he hit a teleportation trap. The sheer coldness of their plan makes Julia freeze up as she hears her name called, and she stammers about the trap story, but Akito shuts them down, calling them the real liars. Akito keeps laying out the truth, reminding them how they pushed him into the boss room and left him behind. Then he looks right at them and asks if they want him to rewrite the official report for them. Jade completely snaps and screams at Akito to shut up, standing there with the horn while he grips the monster part so hard his hand starts shaking from the sheer anger. He tells Akito to shut his mouth and asks if he's really trying to say he's wrong. As Julia watches, but Akito just looks him in the eye and tells him straight up that he isn't wrong about anything. Jade's expression shifts as he tells Akito that he was supposed to be dead, and that it's actually pretty weird for a guy who should be a corpse to be standing right here. He pulls the horn back to strike, yelling that he's about to fix that little problem for him, slamming the heavy horn right against Akito's head as the guy just stands there and takes the hit. The two of them lock eyes. Jade is completely losing his mind, while Akito just stares back, totally unfazed by the massive horn slamming into the floor with a loud crash. Julia watches from the door, saying she can't believe this is happening as Jade growls Akito's name through his teeth, screaming and calling him a total bastard for standing up to him. Harold jumps in and grabs Jade, telling him he needs to knock it off before things get way worse than they already are. Jade tries to shake him off, yelling at Harold to stay out of it and not tell him what to do, but Akito cuts through the noise and tells Jade that's enough, making the guy freeze up in total confusion. The room goes quiet as Akito tells everyone straight up that he's officially done with Golden Fang, and then he adds that if they let him walk, he won't tell anyone about them, leaving him for dead in the boss room. He looks them over with a cold stare, asking if those terms are good enough for them to just move on. Jade stands there without saying a single word, completely shut down by the deal Akito just laid out. Jade doesn't waste any time, telling Akito to pack his bags and get out right now. It's officially over. Akito stands there in the middle of the room, looking at the floor before quietly saying yeah, he's going. He looks up with a calm expression, not even mad, and just says thanks, leaving Jade with a small smile as he tells him thanks for everything. And with that, the door slams shut behind him, marking the end of his time with the party. Later at the inn, Akito drops onto his bed, thinking about how things would have gotten really ugly if he hadn't kept his anger in check. He stares at the ceiling, realizing that since he's out of the party, he has to say goodbye to this room too, but it's even worse when he thinks back. Even though they were an A-rank group, his share of the loot was always tiny. To make matters worse, he was actually the one paying for most of the group's expenses out of his own pocket. He sits up in the dark room, admitting to himself that he hasn't exactly saved up much money for a fresh start. Akito starts stressing out thinking about how he acted all tough back there. But now he's realizing he might actually be in trouble since he's broke. So he starts wondering if there's anything he owns that's even worth selling. He stares out at the city at night, and then it suddenly clicks that he actually might have something useful. So first thing the next day, he heads over to the guild. He walks up to the counter and says he's there to officially quit his party, and on top of leaving the group, he mentions he's got some monster materials he needs to sell off too. The receptionist looks at him like she's seen a ghost, but she keeps it professional and tells him she can take care of that. As Akito walks through the building, he can feel people looking, thinking Jade and the others must have already spread the word about him. He just wants to get the paperwork over with so he can leave, but right then, a voice calls out his name from across the room. It's a guy named Maggle, who looks completely blown away, yelling out and asking Akito if he's really still alive. Akito recognizes him immediately, and Maggle just goes on about how happy he is to see that his friend didn't actually die out there. Maggle starts things off by asking Akito how he's been lately, and he laughs while grabbing Akito's shoulders, saying that according to the report Jade filed, Akito was supposed to be dead after getting caught in a teleportation trap. The mood shifts as Maggle goes quiet, just staring at the kid with a heavy look. Then he tells Akito to come to his office, dragging him across the floor while the receptionist tries to say the paperwork isn't done yet. Maggle just looks back and tells her the staff is great, so they can handle it themselves. He tells her to just send the appraisal results for the items over to his office later, and the receptionist just smiles and says she understands, calling him master as they leave. Once they're alone, Maggle gets straight to it, telling Akito he's going to explain everything that happened in that dungeon. Akito says he gives up and begs to be let go, but Maggle just shuts him down immediately. Maggle looks completely disgusted as he talks about the situation, saying it's seriously sickening. He starts explaining how things are supposed to work, mentioning that for an adventurer, party members should be the kind of comrades you can actually trust with your life. But Akito just looks away, telling Maggle that he appreciates the concern, but everything that happened is already in the past and he's over it. Maggle gets a serious look on his face and asks the kid if he's really sure about letting it go. Because if the guild actually starts looking into the situation seriously, there's a good chance they'll uncover a lot of shady stuff or other scandals involving the Golden Fang. Yet Akito doesn't budge. He just says he doesn't want anything to do with Jade or the rest of that party anymore. Maggle sighs and says he gets why Akito feels that way, but he still seems hesitant to drop the matter. Akito keeps going, telling Maggle that besides everything else, he thinks the best way to get back at them is simply to become a great adventurer himself. Maggle just stands there for a second, looking completely caught off guard by the kid's ambition, but he eventually lets out a laugh and says Akito is probably right. Still, Maggle can't help but point out that Akito seems way too calm about everything. So Akito admits he's actually locking his emotions away just so he doesn't lose his cool and completely snap. Maggle looks a bit uneasy hearing that and says it sounds like a smart move, but he tells Akito he needs to make sure he lets all that pressure out at some point. Akito gives a small smile and thanks him for the advice, promising that he'll definitely find a way to vent once things finally settle down for him. Maggle stops by an office door and calls out to Nira, saying he's got the appraisal results ready, so she tells him to come on in. The receptionist shows up with a tray stacked high with shiny gold coins, apologizing for taking so long to get everything sorted out. She sets the tray down and tells them she has the final results from the appraisal, which is when she explains that just the magic stone from the Black Minotaur is worth 60 gold coins. Akito looks like he's seeing things, just completely floored by the amount. While Maggle just stands there looking pretty satisfied, she keeps going, adding another 30 gold for the horns and 20 more for the pelt, making the final offer a crazy 110 gold coins, which she says the guild is ready to pay right now. Nira looks over at Akito with a friendly smile, asking him if that total sounds okay for the loot he brought in. Akito manages to keep it together and says it sounds good, reaching out to take the paperwork as the receptionist thanks him for the business. But then she stops him for a second because she still needs him to sign the form right there to make the whole trade official. Nira points to the paperwork and mentions they're gonna need his guild card too for the withdrawal process. So Akito just gives a quiet nod, looking a bit worn out from everything that's happened today. The receptionist keeps it professional, telling him to just head over to the main desk whenever he's ready, and she excuses herself to get back to the office, leaving the two guys alone to finish up. Magel starts cracking up, saying it's honestly crazy that Akito actually managed to kill a black minotaur on his own. Akito looks pretty stressed just thinking about it, saying he'd definitely pass if he had to do that fight again, but Magel gets serious for a second, telling Akito that while Jade and his old party were too dumb to see it, he knows exactly how valuable Akito is. He explains that being able to unlock skill trees for other people is a massive deal and a real power, which is why he offers to introduce Akito to a different party that would actually appreciate him. Akito stands there looking totally surprised, while Magel waits to hear what he thinks about the idea. Akito looks down, telling Magel he's sorry and that he really appreciates the thought, but he admits he just doesn't feel like joining a new party right now. He needs some space after everything, so Magel tells him he totally gets it and not to worry about the offer at all. He starts laughing, saying he's sure Akito could even reach S-rank all on his own and that he'd personally guarantee it. Akito gets a bit sentimental, telling him he really can't thank him enough for believing in him, it means a lot, and he repeats his thanks one more time, looking a lot more relaxed than he did before. Magel tells him that if there's ever a request he can help with, Akito shouldn't hesitate to just ask. And then he remembers something, asking Akito how he'd feel about taking on a specific job right now. Akito looks over the paper and sees it's about some increased monster activity way out in the northern mountain range. Magel leans back on the couch, telling him he figured this particular task would be perfect for him right now. Akito takes the paper and tells Magel he's got it. He'll definitely look into the request, and he agrees that the northern mountains actually seem like the perfect spot to test out his new skills. Magel warns him to take the details with a grain of salt, because there have always been some really weird rumors floating around about those mountains, so he just tells Akito to stay safe and be careful while he's out there on the job. Later on, Akito makes it to the snowy mountain forest and starts searching the area. He lets out a frustrated sigh, looking pretty annoyed with how his first encounter went down. Looking at the monster on the ground, he sees the materials are completely trashed and won't sell. Turns out just locking a hellhound's mouth shut isn't a great way to handle things without ruining the loot. He looks at his hand and admits he still hasn't figured out how to fight properly while worrying about keeping materials in one piece. Akito thinks about his finances, even with the big reward from the Black Minotaur. Life is unpredictable, so he reminds himself that a guy can never really have too much money saved up. Since most of the monsters in this northern mountain range aren't actually high level, he decides this is the perfect place to just keep practicing his new fighting style. While he's out there, he stops to think about a really weird story he heard recently. It's an old legend about an ancient hero who supposedly sealed a monster away in these parts. The story also mentions a legendary sword the hero used to carry, but Akito knows it's probably just a rumor since no one has ever found anything like that. In a place like Elania, most people just treat the whole thing like a fairy tale for kids. Suddenly, he stops in his tracks. He can feel the mana around him getting way stronger all of a sudden. Akito stops and looks around, thinking that the mana density in the air is way too high for being only halfway up the mountain. The ground starts vibrating and rocks begin to lift off the dirt, floating around him like gravity just stopped working. He looks up and catches a glimpse of something falling from above, and suddenly massive boulders come crashing down, smashing into the ground and kicking up a huge cloud of dust. He immediately starts moving, thinking to himself that this is definitely a bad situation while he tries to find some cover. In the middle of all the chaos, the rocks start slamming into each other and sticking together, forming a massive pile that turns into a giant silhouette with glowing eyes. The thing looks huge and terrifying standing there in the middle of the trail. Akito starts to sweat, thinking about how these monsters are only supposed to show up deep in the mountains or in old mine shafts, so seeing a rock golem right here makes no sense at all. The massive creature flexes its stone arms and prepares to attack. Akito looks at its stats and sees it's level 30 with a ton of health, which is going to be a real problem. Akito checks out the rock golem's stats. It's got high speed and a bunch of annoying skills like status immunity and fusion, making it suddenly sprout sharp stone pillars all around its body. The monster looks like it's getting ready to unleash a massive area attack, but Akito isn't having it. He looks back at the creature and says this is too much of a hassle, so he's not going to let it use any skills at all. He holds out his hand and calls out the monster's own move, Stone Edge, then follows it up with a lock. Immediately, the floating stones lose their glow and start falling back toward the dirt. And the rock golem just freezes there, completely shocked that its primary attack was shut down before it even started. Akito doesn't waste a second. He draws his sword and activates Fast Blade, turning into a blur as he reaches the monster in an instant. The sound of stone cracking fills the air as his blade makes contact, and he slices right through the heavy rock armor like it's nothing, leaving a massive opening in the golem's defense. He steps back and looks at the creature, casually noting to himself that the binding effect worked out just fine. Akito remembers that the regeneration from the binding skill usually keeps going unless the magic stone inside the body gets destroyed. But he realizes that binding is just another skill he can manipulate, which means he has the upper hand. He yells at the monster that it definitely picked the wrong person to fight and activates his binding lock skill, sending glowing white chains to wrap tightly around the golem's head. Huge chunks of rock break off and slam into the ground with a heavy thud. The golem stands there looking completely wrecked, with one of its arms totally gone. The monster lets out a massive roar, clearly frustrated that it can't fix itself, but Akito just tells the thing that it's useless to keep trying. He leaps high into the air, telling the creature its connection is already locked down, and with a confident look on his face, he notes that all that's left now is to finish it off. Akito doesn't hold back, telling himself to whittle the monster down as he unleashes a final strike that cuts right through the golem. He lands softly and says that's it, while the massive rock creature completely falls apart into a pile of rubble. Walking away from the mess, Akito thinks about how the monsters around here are definitely acting strange, especially since everything in this northern mountain range is usually only around level 20, but that golem was actually level 30. It's clear that the reports of high monster activity were spot on, and he starts to wonder if the high mana concentration in the area is what's causing the spike. He finds a dark opening in the rocks and decides he's gotta investigate the cave, so he steps inside, immediately noticing that it's pitch black without any kind of light source. Akito pulls up his menu, thinking that carrying a torch would just tie up his hands. Akito stares at his floating menu, remembering a specific skill that would be perfect for this dark cave. He finds exactly what he needs and hits the unlock button immediately. As the light level in the tunnel changes, he realizes his visibility is totally clear now. A system message pops up right in front of him, confirming he just acquired the night vision skill. Akito's pretty happy about it. He thinks about how this is way better since he won't have to waste a hand carrying a torch around. But then he stops, noticing several pairs of glowing eyes staring at him from the deep shadows, and before he can react, a whole swarm of creatures flies straight at his face, catching him off guard. He checks their stats and sees they're level 28 monsters called Hat Bats, which are actually pretty fast and come with skills like bloodsucking and stealth. Akito watches them fly around and starts to wonder why these things are attacking. They usually don't mess with anyone unless they're provoked, so things are getting weird. Akito raises his hand as energy starts to gather, telling the swarm he's just going to take them all out at once. He lets loose a wind blow spell, sending sharp blades of air slicing through the air, and the shredded remains of the bats fall straight to the ground in a messy pile. Akito stands there looking a little surprised at the power, thinking about how magic is actually pretty convenient for someone like him who's still a total beginner, but he decides that figuring out the details is a problem for another day. He keeps moving, telling himself that based on the mana he's sensing, the source shouldn't be much further. But then he stops suddenly, looking confused by what's right in front of his face because the tunnel just stops completely at a solid rock wall, leaving him stuck at a dead end. He touches the stone, noting that the magic trail definitely goes right through it, and then he notices something hidden on the surface, so he reaches out and hits the unlock command to see what happens. The stone wall rumbles and slides back to reveal a massive set of doors, and Akito realizes it's a hidden entrance. Places like this are usually found deep in the mountains or at the bottom of the sea where nobody goes. Hidden labyrinths like this are super rare to find, but it's clear someone built this. The way the stone is carved makes it obvious that it's artificial and didn't just happen naturally. Akito checks the door and notices there isn't a keyhole anywhere, so he wonders if it's held shut by magic. He just gives a little smirk and says that doesn't really matter to him anyway. He stares into the dark opening as a strange sound starts to hum from inside, looking down a long flight of stone stairs that leads straight into a pitch-black pit. The air feels heavy and Akito can tell the mana here is crazy strong, so the source has to be close, and even though it's getting intense, he decides it's time to keep moving forward into the dark. Akito keeps heading down the long flight of stone stairs, wondering what he's going to find at the bottom. As he walks, he notices the walls are way too clean for a cave, realizing this whole place was definitely built by someone. He starts thinking about the old legends and wonders if a hero's weapon could actually be hidden down here. But as his boot hits the flat floor at the bottom, he tells himself there's no way that's possible. Just then, Akito stops dead in his tracks with his eyes wide open. He can't believe he's seeing something straight out of a fairy tale. A huge magic circle glows with light, holding a thick chain in place. The chain goes down, pinned into the dark scales of a living creature. The chamber opens up into a huge area, revealing the scale of the room, and right in the center sits a giant black dragon, completely bound by glowing seals and magical chains. The dragon spots him and sounds pretty interested, asking the human who he is as it stares him down. Akito stands there, frozen sweat is dripping down his face because he can't believe what's right in front of him. It makes you wonder what kind of creature actually sits at the very top of the food chain, especially when people usually think of stuff like a Cerberus, a massive cyclops, or even a giant serpent. But the answer to that is a hard no. This specific thing has been around since the beginning of time, just wandering the world and wiping human nations off the map whenever it feels like it. It's known for tearing through the sky and burning the earth until everything is just gone, basically a living, breathing disaster. And that monster is right here, showing off its massive claws and the glowing magic circles keeping it pinned down. The dragon looks Akito dead in the eye and asks the human just who he thinks he is. Akito tries to use his analyze skill to figure out what he's dealing with, but the window just shows a bunch of question marks instead of a level. He starts sweating because he knows the level gap between them is just too huge. Even if he tries to run for it, he knows he's still well within the dragon's reach. His only hope is to somehow find a small opening to make a move, but then the dragon speaks up and tells him to put his sword away. The massive creature tells him it actually has no intention of hurting him. Akito isn't buying it, saying that dragons are basically living disasters to people. He asks the dragon if it really thinks he's just going to believe that, but the dragon points out it can't even move since it's been completely sealed. Akito takes a second to process everything, finally realizing the dragon is actually stuck behind a seal. But that doesn't make him feel any better, since a dragon that needs to be sealed sounds even more dangerous. He starts thinking that if the massive creature really can't move at all, then maybe even he could take it. But the dragon suddenly starts shouting about how it was just a little wild back in the day, like it's making excuses. It goes on, swearing it's learned its lesson and won't do anything bad ever again. The dragon literally begs him to believe it, while Akito just stands there looking completely unimpressed, shutting the creature down immediately because he refuses to be played for a fool. Akito stays focused, explaining that he only came up here to find out why the monsters in the area are going crazy, and now that he's found the most likely cause, he tells the dragon there's really only one thing left to do. Before he can make a move, the dragon panics and shouts for him to wait so they can make a deal. Akito repeats the word deal back to the dragon, sounding pretty skeptical about the whole thing. The dragon quickly tries to sell him on the idea, explaining that if he manages to break the seal, it promises to lend him all its power in exchange for its freedom. The dragon asks what he thinks of that offer, acting like it's doing him a huge favor, but Akito isn't buying it, telling the dragon straight up that its arrogant attitude is just getting on his nerves. The dragon immediately loses the tough guy act and starts begging, saying it'll do literally anything if he just helps it out. Watching the massive creature grovel, Akito asks if it even has any pride left as a dragon, but the dragon just yells back that it's been trapped in this hole for 300 years, so it really doesn't care about looking cool or keeping its pride anymore as long as it gets to leave. It keeps shouting about how badly it wants to go outside, leaving Akito standing there in total silence. Akito looks at the massive chains and admits he isn't even sure if he's capable of breaking a seal like this. The dragon just calls that a cute thing to say, sounding like it doesn't take his doubts seriously at all. Akito reminds the creature that he already broke the seal at the entrance just to get into this room, so he's actually pretty sure there's no way he can't handle this one as well. He stands there thinking for a second before telling the dragon that even if it promises to do anything, he's curious to know what exactly a dragon could even do to help him out. The dragon looks pretty proud of itself and says that if there's ever a country he doesn't like, it'll just go ahead and destroy the whole place for him without a second thought. The dragon asks what he thinks of that offer, but Akito just stares back with a look of pure regret, telling the monster that after hearing that, maybe it's actually better if it stays sealed up in here forever. The dragon finds his lack of evil intent pretty boring, but Akito makes it clear he has zero interest in wrecking countries, so the giant creature just looks at him and asks what it is he actually wants out of life instead. Akito takes a second to think while those massive dragon eyes stay locked onto him, waiting for his reply. He finally explains that his real goal is just to get stronger and become a legit, full-fledged adventurer, and he doesn't stop there, telling the beast that he's specifically aiming to reach S rank one day. The dragon mentions it heard that only a tiny handful of humans ever actually make it to that level, but Akito doesn't flinch, insisting that he still has to become one regardless of how hard it is. That answer gets the dragon laughing. It calls his dream totally reckless but pretty fun to hear about, and then it just casually decides right then and there that it's going to join up with his party. Akito just stands there with this look of total confusion, completely stunned by the dragon's sudden offer. The dragon notices Akito's hesitation and asks if he actually doubts what's being said, so to prove its point, the massive beast decides to just pay the guy in advance. It stands tall, letting out a bright light that completely washes over Akito, who stands there surrounded by a swirl of energy, trying to process what's happening. The dragon looks down at him and explains that it just gave him a special blessing. Since the gift is already done, it tells the kid to just check his status screen, and sure enough, a new notification for the fire dragon's blessing pops right up. Akito looks at the screen then back up at the dragon, asking if this is the real deal, and the dragon just smirks, confirming that it's a seriously powerful upgrade. As Akito looks closer, he realizes something totally new just showed up in his skill tree. The fire dragon continues explaining things, saying that if he keeps leveling up and training, eventually Akito will be able to wield the power of a dragon himself. But as the beast speaks, something starts happening to the kid's hand. Right there in the middle of the room, Akito's right arm suddenly transforms into a massive flaming dragon claw. He stares at the glowing armor and the heat coming off it, just saying that the power is amazing. The dragon is completely thrown off by this, yelling out to ask how the kid is already using one of its skills. Akito keeps it cool and explains that he didn't just learn it, he actually used his extra skill to acquire the power, which gets the dragon thinking. It looks at him closely and asks if it's some kind of unsealing skill, and Akito just watches the flames dance around his fingers while admitting it's something like that. The massive beast narrows its eyes, mentioning how it's even more intrigued by this guy now than before. It makes an offer, saying if he breaks the seal, it can be way more helpful, but Akito just shuts it down and says he refuses. Akito stands tall and shouts that he's officially taken the flame dragon's power for himself. But the beast just points out how he went and did that totally on his own without listening to a word anyone said. The dragon demands that Akito give the power back right now, which leaves the kid sounding pretty confused. Looking serious, Akito explains that he's already decided to make it in this world by himself. The dragon asks if he's really doing this for his own sake, and Akito just gives a simple yes. As he thinks back to his old party, Akito tells himself he's going to become a real adventurer and show Jade moving on to the rest of the group. He's set on proving every single one of them wrong. He clenches his fist, thinking about how he's doing this for everything he's had to suffer through lately. But the dragon cuts right through that, asking if this is all just about his petty pride. The massive beast gets right in his face, telling him he'll never become an S-rank adventurer with that kind of mindset. The fire dragon looks Akito right in the eyes and asks if he's really okay with just proving people wrong, but he keeps going, saying he always thought being an adventurer was about something much bigger than that. He sighs, explaining that real adventurers are supposed to be out there finding new lands, treasures, and mysteries. Looking down at the kid, the dragon finishes by saying he was clearly mistaken about who Akito really is. Akito starts to say something back, but he gets cut off when he feels something strange nearby. He spins around and asks what that was, making the dragon look back and ask what he's talking about. Rocks start falling from the ceiling as Akito asks the dragon how he could have possibly missed that. Right then, a massive stone shape starts pulling itself together from the rubble on the ground. The dragon looks out at the chamber and calls them uninvited guests as an entire army of golems starts closing in, leaving Akito staring them down, completely shocked by just how many of them are showing up at once. The flame dragon looks down at Akito and mentions how he was likely pulled into this hidden place by his magic. He adds that the seal holding the area together was already falling apart before he even got there. Akito loses it for a second, yelling that if the dragon knew the seal was broken, he should have just said something, but the golems keep coming and the dragon just watches, asking the human what he plans to do about the situation. Trapped and surrounded, Akito grits his teeth and starts wondering if this is actually where his life ends. Right then, he snaps out of it and yells that there is no way he's going down in a place like this. He reaches his hand out toward the light, telling himself that his journey is really just getting started. The kid stands his ground right in front of the massive dragon as the whole room starts to glow with energy. He looks the beast in the eye and shouts for the flame dragon to lend him his power. The dragon stares back at him for a moment before finally agreeing and telling him very well. A massive shockwave hits the golems, blowing them into tiny stone fragments, and a huge cross-shaped blast of energy follows up, completely wiping out everything. Thick smoke and dust fill the entire room as the monsters turn into rubble. A girl with long hair and horns suddenly appears right behind Akito and asks how he liked that, bragging that it's just a taste of her power after 300 years. She looks around the empty room and says those golems weren't even a warm-up, so Akito just stands there in shock, finally asking if she can actually take a human form. The dragon girl brushes it off, telling him that changing her shape is a piece of cake. She's ready to leave and tells the human to move it since she wants to see the outside world, but Akito tries to slow her down, telling her she needs to wait a second. Akito tries to head out, but the dragon girl stops him in his tracks. He looks back confused and asks what's going on while she just tilts her head, wondering if there's actually an issue. Akito is clearly stressed out and tells her that, first of all, she seriously needs to put some clothes on. His voice carries across the whole mountain range and she listens, shifting her scales into a black and white dress. She shows off the new look, asking if he has any more complaints now that she's covered up. Akito is still a bit thrown off, so he asks why she even chose a human form to begin with. She just laughs and tells him the reason is pretty simple. If she stayed in her massive dragon form, she'd probably end up accidentally crushing him. She explains that the outfit she's wearing isn't even real fabric, it's just her scales transformed into that shape. Akito takes a second to process everything and casually mentions he honestly thought she was a guy the whole time, making the dragon girl take offense. She calls him rude and asks how he couldn't tell she was a girl from her build and her shiny scales. Moving on, Akito realizes they never really got around to names. He stops and finally introduces himself to her as Akito. Akito stands back and asks the flame dragon what she wants to be called now. Since they're traveling together, she stops and thinks about the idea of having an actual name. Akito waits for an answer while she admits that humans actually gave her a name a long time ago without even asking her first, but she refuses to use it. She tells him it's not cute at all, and she'd rather just leave it behind, so she points at him and decides Akito should be the one to come up with something new. He's caught off guard and asks if she's serious, but she just smiles and tells him he's definitely the guy for the job. She wants a name that actually fits her new human form, and Akito looks pretty stressed about the responsibility. He tries to tell her it's not that easy to just invent a name on the spot, but then something clicks. He gets a sudden idea that might actually work. He pulls out his notebook and starts scribbling away. The dragon girl watches him work, wondering what he's come up with until Akito turns the book around with a smile. He shows her the page and tells her that from now on, her name is Eren. Akito shows her the notebook where he's written the name Ellen, explaining that back where he's from, it actually means beginning. He tells her it's the perfect fit for her right now, and she gives a little smirk, admitting that she actually likes it. Then she gives him a huge grin and tells him it's time to move. She's ready to get going, so Akito just smiles back and agrees, calling her Eren for the first time as they head out together. A massive dragon foot slams down as they prepare to take off. This is the moment their real journey starts and they go soaring through the air. Akito hitches a ride right on her back as they leave the cave behind. Eventually, they make it to their destination. They step out onto a paved road and Akito tells her they've finally arrived. Eren looks around with her mouth hanging open, completely blown away by everything she's seeing for the first time. Akito walks her into the main part of town, explaining that this is where he usually stays and handles his business, giving her the grand tour of the place. He lets her know the town is called Elania. Eren looks around with a huge grin, totally hyped by the massive crowd of humans everywhere. She stands there with her hands on her hips, giving off some pretty scary vibes, while she admits that seeing a giant city like this honestly just makes her want to tear the whole place down. Akito doesn't even flinch. He just puts a hand to his chin and wonders out loud how someone would go about sealing a dragon. Eren immediately loses it and starts sweating, while Akito just calmly repeats the word seal. She starts tearing up and panicking, yelling that she was just joking and would never actually do anything like that. Akito tells her to relax because his extra skill doesn't even have the power to do something that crazy anyway, but Eren thinks it over and says it actually seems possible if he used the skill the right way. As they keep walking, Akito explains that the absolute most he could do at his current level is just trap an enemy, and Eren quickly replies that she doesn't want any part of being trapped either, so they keep moving through the streets. Akito looks over at her as they walk and tells her to just behave herself, but Eren keeps looking around at everything, mentioning that even so, it's pretty different. She's surprised to see so many different races living together since the last time she was out. Akito finds that interesting and asks if things weren't like that back when she was around, and Eren just laughs, explaining that all the different races were basically always at war back then. She gets a huge grin and admits she used to love jumping into those fights just to cause total chaos. Akito gives her a deadpan look, making her immediately panic and shout that it's nothing while she tries to wave it off, getting even more flustered when he won't stop staring her down. Moving on, Akito points out that while there are still some racial issues and small fights here and there, they don't really deal with any of those massive, extreme wars in the world anymore. Akito notes that while things are better now, tensions between humans and elves have been going up, but looking back at the old days, they're actually living together pretty well. Suddenly, Eren shouts his name from across the street, waving him over because she found something cool, and Akito just looks stressed, telling her she needs to stop wandering off by herself like that. She completely ignores him though, pointing at the grill and telling him to check out the food. The girl is totally blown away by the massive amount of meat being cooked right in front of them. So Akito explains that those are black buffalo skewers, which makes Eren's eyes light up even more. She starts losing it, shouting about how hungry she is and telling him she absolutely has to eat this right now. Akito tries to argue that they really need to hit the guild first, but Eren won't hear any of it. Akito finally gives in and tells the shopkeeper he'll take some, which has Eren cheering in the back while Akito orders 3 skewers. The shopkeeper just gives a big thumbs up and hands the food over right away. Eren doesn't waste a second and just shoves a huge piece of meat in her mouth, immediately losing it and shouting about how delicious it is. She's actually looking at the skewer in total shock, asking what this stuff even is. Akito watches her, thinking it's good food, but wondering if it's actually that amazing. Eren doesn't care though, dancing around while saying the meat isn't gamey at all. She keeps hyping it up, talking about how tender it is and how the sweet sauce is the perfect match for the meat. Eren stares at the glistening meat skewer, mentioning she's eaten human food before, but she's never had anything this delicious in her life. She looks completely hooked on the snack and the shopkeeper just laughs, telling her he's really glad to hear she likes it that much. Eren is so hyped she starts shouting for seconds immediately, forcing Akito to try and slow her down, but he eventually gives in, telling the shopkeeper he'll pay for a little extra to keep her happy. Akito looks totally exhausted by her energy, while Eren just cheers because she got exactly what she wanted. After finishing up, Akito suggests they start heading toward the guild and talk while they walk. Moving on, the two of them arrive at the massive building for the Elania Adventurers Guild. Akito lets out a tired sigh as they stand at the entrance, saying they've finally made it there. Eren looks over at him, noticing his mood and asking Akito what's wrong. Eren leans in close, her dragon-like eyes searching his face as she points out that he looks totally wiped, and Akito looks like he's about to collapse, still feeling the stress from everything that happened on the way to the guild. He snaps at her, saying it's only because she dragged him to every single food stall and ate way too much, but Eren just shrugs it off, telling him that she was actually holding back her appetite the whole time. Akito reminds her that she managed to eat through a whole gold coin's worth of snacks, making Eren look pretty guilty as she apologizes, explaining that it's been forever since she had a real meal and everything tasted amazing. Akito gets a serious look on his face, telling her that if he's paying, she better pull her weight once they start adventuring, and she gets all fired up, promising to handle it since she's still incredibly strong even if she isn't at her peak. Akito just closes his eyes and says he's counting on her, finally accepting that they're in this together. The two of them walk up to the guild reception desk, where Akito tells the staff he wants to register his partner as a new adventurer. Eren stands tall at the counter and loudly tells the staff she's there to become an adventurer, and Nira just smiles, saying she understands before handing over a registration sheet for her to fill out. Eren starts scribbling away and asks if she's doing it right, looking pretty focused on the task, which actually surprises Akito, who admits he wasn't sure if she even knew how to write. Eren just replies that writing was a good way to kill time back when she was sealed away, but then Nira spots something on the paper and lets out a confused sound, leaning in closer, as Eren turns to Akito and asks what she should even put down for her age. Akito doesn't even hesitate and tells her to just put 17. While Nira looks on completely stunned, finally asking if they should really be that casual about just making up details on the official form. Eren ignores the concern and happily holds up the paper saying it's finished, so Akito tells her she's all set. Nira takes the paper and says she'll get the registration started, smiling as she tells Eren they're ready to issue her official guild card. Then she sets a blank card down and asks Eren to drop some blood on it. Eren pricks her finger and lets a drop fall right onto the center, causing the whole thing to light up with a crazy bright glow. Eren watches the text appear and says the card seems pretty mysterious, even admitting she has no clue what kind of material it's made out of. She turns to Akito and asks if he's using some kind of weird device, but he just says that as long as it works, that's all that really matters. Nira finishes up and tells Eren her registration is finally complete. Eren looks totally hyped holding her brand new guild card and gives a big thanks to Nira for the help. Akito steps in and tells the receptionist he'll handle the job of explaining how adventurer ranks work to her later, but right now, he needs to give a status update on that secret mission the guild master assigned him. Nira nods and tells him she'll go grab the higher-ups, asking the two of them to grab a seat while they wait. As they sit down, Eren remembers that he was technically at that cave on official guild business. And Akito realizes she's right. Eren brings up one more detail about her new identity, making Akito wonder what she's getting at this time. He tells her the plan is to just blame everything on a weird spike in mana density to keep things simple, making it clear he has no intention of mentioning her presence in his official report at all. Eren gives him a confident grin and tells him to leave the rest of the acting to her. So Akito starts wondering how many people actually remember the world's ancient history and what might happen if they find out. Akito stares at the board and thinks about how the whole situation would be a total disaster if word ever got out, realizing that the secret of her identity is the one thing that actually needs to be kept hidden from the world. He notices Eren looking pretty down and calls out her name to check on her, but she just stands there looking right at him. She tells him flat out that she doesn't want to be sealed away again, which catches him off guard. He quickly tells her that as long as they don't cause any trouble, things should be fine, yet Eren is deep in her own head. She thinks about how she finally made it to the outside world and even managed to join up with Akito's party. She grips her hands tight, thinking about the past and how the idea of going back to being all alone is actually pretty scary to her now. She looks completely heartbroken and tells herself that she definitely doesn't want that life anymore, making it clear she wants to stay. Akito sees the look on her face and just quietly says he understands, finally seeing where she's coming from. Eren thinks back on the 300 years she spent trapped in total isolation, realizing the absolute worst thing that could happen is being sealed and left behind all over again. She looks back at her old dragon form in the darkness, wondering where she'd be if she hadn't left, and then she looks at Akito, realizing that he actually understands her because they're the same. Akito speaks up and tells everyone not to worry, because as far as he's concerned, Eren is his comrade. He makes a promise to himself that he'll never let any of his friends suffer like that, so he gives her a thumbs up and tells her that even if she gets sealed again, he'll just be the one to unlock it. Hearing him say something so bold and simple actually makes her start laughing, and she looks at him with a big grin, telling him he's honestly one of the most interesting people she's met. Back at the guild, Magal tells Akito he's trusting him to have actually learned his lesson from everything that happened. Back at the guild, Magal tells Akito he's sure he's learned his lesson by now, and Akito says of course he has. The scene then shifts away from the peaceful guild to a dark, cold stone corridor in a dungeon, where Jade is suddenly in a total panic. Grit his teeth and swearing because things are going south, he looks completely shocked, staring at the battle and wondering why nothing is going the way it should. It turns out the attacks that worked fine before aren't doing anything now, and the monsters are just roaring. Jade loses his cool and screams about what the hell is happening while he desperately swings his sword. He turns and yells to Harold, telling the big guy to keep the monsters focused on him and the shield. But Harold yells back that he's already doing his best to hold the line while he gets hammered. Jade can't believe it and calls out that he's only holding back 2 of them, which is a huge problem because Harold can barely move, complaining that the monsters' hits feel way heavier than they ever did before. Julia is starting to lose it, yelling that most of her skills won't even activate, which sets Jade off. He tells her not to screw with him and screams her name because he's stuck on the front lines, demanding to know what the hell is taking her so long. He keeps barking orders, telling her to hurry up and blast them with magic like she always does. Julia's had enough of the shouting and snaps back, telling him to shut up and stay quiet. She finally gets a spell ready and shouts that she's going in. But as she launches her flame spear at the monsters, something is clearly off. The monsters just stand there roaring, taking the hit like it was nothing at all. Jade looks like he's seeing a nightmare. Yelling and asking if she's kidding him, Julia just turns away looking completely drained, arguing that she's just not feeling it today. Julia is freaking out because her mana flow is a total mess, and she's suddenly forced to chant her spells. Jade isn't having any of it, snapping at her that she's done nothing but complain for way too long. She looks back at him completely stressed out and yells, asking what the hell he thinks he's doing. She's losing it, screaming for him to just use his Thunder Flash skill and clear the way like usual. Jade just stares at her with wide eyes and asks if she's supposed to be the attacker here. But before she can say anything else, he tells her to shut up while he tries to move. Everything is falling apart for him. His body feels like lead and he realizes he can't even trigger his skill. That's when Akito watches from the side, calmly mentioning that the power they were using was actually his. Jade is completely stunned, barely able to make a sound as the reality of the situation hits him. He checks his status screen in a panic only to find out every single skill he stole is officially gone. The fight gets even worse when a monster charges in, and Julia screams for Jade to look out as it unleashes a roar, leaving Jade sweating and swearing about the heat while he struggles to keep it together. Julia looks down, totally stressed out, and starts to realize that something is seriously wrong with how they're performing, wondering aloud if everything is falling apart just because Akito isn't with them anymore. Jade hears this and gets defensive, asking her if she's actually trying to say that his choice to kick him out was a mistake, but he immediately shuts the idea down and tells himself there's no way that's the reason. He stares at his blade, trying to find his resolve, and decides that he just needs to settle things with his own hands, getting this creepy, unhinged look on his face while he vows to kill Akito himself. Back at the guild, Magel looks pretty worked up while he talks to Akito about the situation they're in. Then the scene shifts over to a large house in the city where things are finally starting to. Akito's eyes snap open as he slowly starts to wake up, taking in the view of a room in an inn that's different from where they usually stay. He stretches out a hand, thinking about how he feels weirdly refreshed. Then he notices something off, feeling like the bed is way warmer than usual. He questions the heat while looking totally dazed and confused, only to look down and find Eren curled up right next to him under the sheets. She's got a huge smile on her face, talking in her sleep about being able to eat even more. Akito starts shaking, thinking they were 100% supposed to be in separate beds tonight, sweating like crazy, while he wonders how she even ended up in his bed. Things get even worse when he realizes she isn't wearing a single thing under the covers. Akito tries to piece his memory together, remembering Magel cheering about them having dinner just yesterday, recollecting how they were all drinking and clinking mugs, convinced that nothing else happened after that. But his head is spinning as he tries to stay calm, telling himself there's no way things went south. He just lies there in bed with his hand over his face, feeling the weight of the situation while he finally tells Eren she needs to wake up, getting a sleepy, half-awake response from her. Eren sits up and rubs her eyes, giving Akito a casual good morning like nothing is wrong at all. Akito isn't having it though, immediately asking her what she thinks she's doing in his spot, leaving Eren looking totally lost as she simply says she was just sleeping in the bed. He doesn't let up, pointing out that her own bed is clearly over on the other side of the room. Eren gets a bit quiet, looking away while she admits it was her bed at first, but things changed. Eren grips the bedsheets tight while she explains that being in the dark makes her feel really anxious, but she looks Akito right in the eyes and says she feels safe just because he's there with her. Akito lets out a heavy sigh, realizing that even after promising not to seal her away, she's still on edge, so he tells her it's fine for today since it was only him she climbed into bed with. Moving on, he gives her a serious warning to never try something like that with any other guys, telling her she won't have any right to complain if they actually decide to attack her. So he tells her to just hurry up and get dressed so they can finally head down for breakfast. Eren leans in close to his face and asks if he's talking about being attacked in a certain way, and as Akito's eyes widen in shock, she tells him she wouldn't mind if it were him doing it. She just sticks her tongue out with a cheeky smile, asking him what he thinks about that. Akito is looking totally lost and asks her what on earth she's talking about while Eren leans in with a smirk, telling him she owes him for breaking the seal. She keeps going, saying that if being with her would make him happy, then Akito just freezes up, completely stunned by how bold she's being right now. She looks him dead in the eye and tells him they can just do it right now, leaving Akito totally speechless as he tries to process what she just said. But then Eren notices a change in his vibe and asks him what's up. His face goes completely blank and cold, making Eren wonder why he's acting so different. And then he just tells her to move out of the way already, so she huffs and covers herself up, asking if he doesn't find her attractive at all. Akito keeps his cool and explains that he's basically locked away his libido, so he just has absolutely zero interest in doing anything like that right now. Eren isn't buying it and teases him about how hard he was blushing earlier, leaving him just staring her down in silence. He looks around the empty room and says he's sure there are other people in their group who care about that sort of stuff, but that's just not where his head is at. Eren starts to say something else but stops, just watching him with a curious look as Akito heads for the door, telling her that his only real goal is taking care of his teammates. The words hit home, and Eren's eyes go wide like she's seeing him in a whole new light. She catches her breath and gives him a sly smirk, telling him he really went and said it. As he leaves, she laughs it off and tells him to just let her know if he ever changes his mind. Eren wraps herself up and gives a smug little grin, saying this is definitely going to be something worth seeing. Akito is totally stressed out by her teasing and yells that there is no way he'd ever say something that cheesy, but he tries to change the subject, telling her that if they don't get a move on right now, they're going to miss breakfast entirely. That gets Eren fired up. She points to the sky and yells that they should go eat, while Akito just watches her go. The two of them head over to the main guild building to get their day started, and inside, a quest form gets slammed down onto the wooden reception counter with a lot of energy. The paper is an official request for slaying a giant turtle, a pretty serious job for any adventurer. Eren leans over the desk and tells the receptionist she wants to take this one, while Nira tries to find a way to explain the details. Suddenly Akito reaches out and grabs the paper, telling Eren she can't just go around applying for quests without him. Nira gives a sheepish smile and apologizes, saying she's actually the one who told Eren about the job in the first place. Nira just gives them a friendly smile and tells them not to worry about the mix-up. But Akito steps in to get things back on track, reminding Eren about the talk they had regarding how the guild assigns ranks. He holds up a finger to explain the logic, saying that every adventurer has to pick jobs that actually match their current rank, and points out that since he's a C rank and she just signed up as an F rank, they have some limitation. He clarifies that even as a party, the absolute highest quest they're allowed to accept is a C rank, so he looks down at the paper she's holding and asks what rank the turtle quest actually is. The paper is clearly labeled as an A rank mission, making Eren realize they can't actually take the job. Eren looks pretty annoyed by the restriction, complaining that if they just play it safe, S rank will always be out of reach. Akito doesn't budge, telling her straight up that hitting the top tier isn't something that's going to happen overnight, and it's going to take a massive amount of work and clearing a ton of smaller requests to finally get there. Akito looks at the stack of paperwork and mentions that how other people at the guild see them is going to be really important, and explains that for the next little while, the focus is just going to be on making enough money to support the both of them. Eren stands there with her hands on her hips, complaining that her current pay isn't even enough to cover what they eat, especially since she's putting in a lot of effort to hold back her true strength while Nira just watches them with a smile. Eren's mood flips and she gets a big grin on her face, saying she has another reason for wanting to go on this mission. But Akito admits his own goal is just to finally see what her real power looks like, which gets a hyped reaction out of her. Later on, Akito checks out the quest board at the guild and says he's just hoping they can find some good work to take on. They head out to a dry, rocky trail in the mountains where Akito asks if the wyvern is supposed to be further up this path. He looks around at the empty landscape and notes that it definitely seems like they're heading in the right direction, and mentions that this highway is usually packed with travelers who are heading into town to restock on their supplies. The trail is usually a main route for merchants bringing goods into Elania, but right now it's a ghost town. Eren looks around at the empty landscape and points out that there isn't a single person in sight. Akito explains that ever since that wyvern showed up, people have been way too scared to use this road. So Eren figures that if they just take out those overgrown lizards, everything will go back to normal. Akito adds that he's actually looking forward to finally seeing what her skills can really do this time around. That gets Eren hyped up, and she tells him she wouldn't mind giving him some pointers while they're at it. She starts walking with her hands behind her head, acting all confident, while Akito just thinks about how reliable she is. She keeps up the energy and says it's finally time for some total annihilation, but then she suddenly stops in her tracks when she senses something off in the distance. Eren locks her eyes on something up ahead and tells Akito she's found someone who might be a problem. The path ahead is completely blocked by a massive field of plant monsters with snapping jaws. Akito takes one look at the mess and tells Eren she was right about this being the perfect target. He seems pretty hyped about it, and Eren just grins and says they might as well get started then. Without another word, Akito charges right into the thick of it with a wild look on his face. The plant monsters immediately snap their heads toward him, ready to tear him apart, but Eren is watching him closely, her eyes locked on every move he makes as he gets into position. He lets loose a massive attack called Scorching Breath, and a huge wave of fire wipes out the monsters. Akito looks back at the total destruction he just caused and says the power is absolutely incredible. Eren stands there with her arms crossed, acting all proud while she says it's only natural for her skills, but then her expression turns serious as she warns him that they aren't finished quite yet. Eren clenches her fist tight and tells Akito that his power is still way too weak. She starts yelling out weird sounds, telling him he needs to put more roar into it. Akito just stands there with a totally blank face, so Eren asks what's with the look. He tells her that her advice doesn't actually explain anything, which just makes her more annoyed. Looking down at the fire in his hand, Akito admits he isn't used to attacking with magic. It's a lot harder to control than he expected. Eren doesn't let him off easy though, saying it's pretty weak for a guy who's always talking about reaching S rank. Akito snaps back that he's still just practicing, but the argument gets cut short when a massive shockwave hits them out of nowhere, putting both of them on high alert. Akito tells the lizard monster to shut up as it jumps out and roars right in their faces. A level 30 dragon suddenly appears. Its stats pop up showing it's got some decent power, but Akito doesn't look worried at all. He just smiles and asks Eren if she's finally going to show off. She gives him a confident smirk and says yeah, she's got this handled. Eren steps forward, telling Akito to just watch and learn how it's actually done while the dragon growls, showing off its rows of sharp teeth and spikes. Eren doesn't waste any time, focusing her energy as she starts to build up a massive fire blast that hits the dragon dead on, completely covering the whole area in flames. As the smoke clears, Eren looks pretty annoyed, Complaining that it was just a weak wyvern, she stares at the charred body on the ground, frustrated that her attack didn't erase it entirely. Akito is just standing there blown away, thinking to himself that Eren really is on another level. The spiked dragon lets out a massive roar as the fight heats up. Akito takes a second to realize how hyped he is to finally be fighting alongside someone like Eren, and she looks back at him with a wild grin, asking what he's planning to do about the rest of the monsters. Akito just smiles and says nothing could make him happier, telling her to leave the next part to him. He starts focusing, narrating to himself about compressing all that magic power deep inside his body. He keeps it tightly packed until it's right on the verge of blowing up, letting the energy build up more and more as he settles into a low stance, waiting for the perfect moment. Everything turns into a blinding flash of light while he tells himself to just hold it in a bit longer. Then he suddenly launches, kicking off magical platforms in the air and flying straight toward the dragon. The dragon can barely react as Akito's massive, glowing strike comes crashing right for its head. Akito puts everything into one final dash, moving so fast the air around him starts to shake. He slams into the dragon with a massive burst of energy that lights up the whole cave. The hit is a direct one, completely crushing the monster's head and ending the fight instantly, leaving Akito collapsed on the ground while Eren walks over, asking him if he's finally out of mana. Eren looks down at the destruction he caused, trailing off as she starts to say how crazy that move was, but Akito just looks up at her with a grin, asking how he did for his first time trying that. She just laughs and tells him he's still got a long way to go if he wants to impress her. So the scene shifts back to the city, where a report of the encounter has already reached the higher-ups. Magel stares at the papers in total disbelief, asking if the information in the report is actually true, and Jade stands right there in front of him, confirming that there's absolutely no mistake about what happened. Magel doesn't waste any time, giving the order to get a team out to the cave site immediately. He follows that up by telling his staff to put out an official summons for the adventurers in town. Someone asks what rank they should be looking for to handle a mess this big, and Magel says that's going to depend on what the investigators actually find once they get a look at the place. Looking out over the city, it's pretty clear that things are about to get busy, especially since it's been a really long time since the guild had to deal with a monster subjugation on this scale.